Do you think that the architecture has any sort of like psychological effects on buyers?
That's a good question. I come from retail, and I know retail it does. Automotive, I think it's just about clean, and it's about the customer experience of the sales. I don't think most of the customers, when I've been on site, they look in and they'll do the, oh wow, this is really nice. But then they're looking at the cars. Oftentimes, I think one of my specialties has been adaptive reuse. So we'll buy a building and it doesn't match, but we've got to fit the look into that building. So it's working adjacencies of departments.
Do you get a lot of creative freedom still or no? All right, you guys, welcome back to another episode of the podcast. Today's guest is Robert Bowman. He's a senior architect within the real estate department at Napleton Automotive Group. Bob has spent decades designing and delivering dealership and commercial products from a blank page to a grand opening, blending architecture, construction, and operations into one end-to-end division that most dealerships never get to see. Robert, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You work for Napleton Automotive, and you're the architecture for building new stores. Is that, how would you describe yourself?
Basically, the real estate development department, basically they do everything themselves. So it's procurement, they get the properties, they have the dealerships, and then as they build or buy or whatever, then I do their stuff, their design and construction.
So are you involved in all with the placement of stores, or are you just...
No, yeah. So that's done through the automotive side, because obviously there's legalities and there's distances, and you gotta do all the circles around it to make sure you're not too close to this or that, the other thing. So they will pick the properties once they get a property and it's then purchased and it's a lock, because a lot of times obviously they'll be looking at multiple properties. So I may do a fit plan or something to kind of show how something might fit on a particular property, but it will not go to anything more than just a loose sketches until we actually lock in it's actually an actual project.
And so how long have you been doing this for?
In 2008, 2009, when we had that last economic issue, I was the director of architecture for a company, and they didn't need a director level because they didn't want to spend the money on it, and they had other architects on staff. So I was kind of laid off, and I started my own thing because no one was hiring. And through a lead of a designer I knew, Napleton was looking for an architect to do a new project, and I bid it. I won it, and then on my first day, they wanted me to work in their office because at that point, Mr. Napleton was very hands-on with his project. So he likes day-to-day interaction. Mm-hmm. So he wanted me to be in the office. And since I was by myself, that was worked fine for me. And then on my first day, I walk in, they turned it from a consultant working in the office to a full-time employee with a caveat that they had enough work to last me 2 years.
Okay.
So I said, that's fine. Build my new business, and I'll have 2 years worth of work to actually market with. And then that 2 years turned into 17 years. So
wow. So they got you.
they got me.
They got you good. So how many buildings have you guys, developed?
When I started, I think we had 15 or 20. We're up to about 65 or 70 now.
Wow.
Sometimes I don't entirely, unless it's an actual design project, I don't exactly keep track of the growth per se. Mm-hmm. But we're in multiple states. We're in about 5 states now.
Okay.
So I think I believe we're in the top 10 of national automotive groups.
So I know that, some of these new franchise stores, a lot of them have like certain requirements that you have to make your store kind of look like. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, it used to be when I started doing automotive, you could do your own thing. It was basically an independent design. The manufacturers got to the point where they started dictating. They were hiring outside designers to come up with a look, and so they would give you a design intent package, which would have a prototype that's been developed, and then you would take that prototype, and then you'd have to build what was in the prototype. If you're doing a ground up, that's easy because you're just copying the prototype. Oftentimes, I think one of my specialties has been adaptive reuse. So we'll buy a building and it doesn't match the DID, but we've got to fit the look into that building. So it's working adjacencies of departments and then making sure that you can fit, a lot of times you can't get the ceiling heights, you can't, so it's a product of adapting what they give you. But over the course of the last 10, 12 years, they become much more strict with regards to their package as far as what you have to bring, because obviously at the end of the day, they have to sign off on the final construction. So if it doesn't meet their criteria, then you would have to correct it before they'll allow you to sell and to keep moving forward. So with the dealership.
Do you get a lot of creative freedom still, or no?
Yeah, actually, because we also own other properties and stuff. So I've done retail. I've done commercial interiors. So yeah, I'm more of a technical architect than a design architect. So my degree is in architectural technology, which is basically just doing the nuts and bolts of architecture. So the actual adapting and working on those is the creative aspect of it. How do you fit this program into this building that doesn't quite work? And Napleton has a history of buying properties that are not conducive to what we want them to be. So you have to be creative to try to make it work. So that's the fun part. That's the creative part.
You're putting a square through a circle sometimes.
Exactly. And I think there was a transition period where I think a lot of the dealers felt that, yeah, we should be able to do what we want. But then they started hitting that brick wall of the manufacturer. So I remember when I first started, there was a project I was working on. I think I did 20 designs for the exterior, knowing full well that eventually they will come back and go, you can't do this but obviously that didn't really matter until they drew that line, and eventually they did. But that's where the creativity is, just throwing together all these ideas, making sure it works. Because even though you got to blend the dealer's wants and wish list and adjacencies and how they operate into the manufacturer's, criteria.
Yeah.
And those have changed over time. They've taken a lot of what we would used to put back of house into the front of the house. So used to have just a standalone customer waiting area that serviced predominantly the service department. Now they've taken all that customer stuff and pulled it and integrated it into the sales experience. So it took a little while, I think, for a lot of the dealers that I was working with before and now with Naples. It's just to get comfortable with the fact that there's the whole customer experience has changed.
Do you think that the architecture has any sort of like psychological effects on buyers?
That's a good question. I think I come from retail, and I know retail it does. Automotive, I think it's just about clean, and it's about the customer experience of the sales. I don't think most of the customers, when I've been on site, they look in and they'll do oh wow, this is really nice, but then they're looking at the cars. Like any retail, which is what automotive is. You don't want them looking up at the lighting. You want them looking down at the car, right? So the thing is, you don't want to whiz bang them with the environment. You want that the focus needs to be on the car, and that's what you're focusing on. So, so I think what best gets their attention to the car, I think, is the experience that you want them to have.
How in depth do these manufacturers get when it comes to like, this is how we want the stores to be?
Well, they have a bunch of boxes that you have to check. So they will have, some of them they'll require you to have a kids play area, or they will require a new car delivery area, and those will have certain criteria. And then they may want to have a seating area, a customer seating area out in the front in the showroom, so that you wrap that into, it used to be we just line up cars. Now you got to have room for either a special car display or you have furniture sitting areas where you got an area rug and stuff like that. Now they used to have a little desk there for a receptionist just to meet and greet as the people come in. Now you sit down there and it's a little bar. You sit down and you talk, and there's the internet state. So it's a little bit more involved. Again, I think it's adapting to the technological side of way we operate today. Is people come in with their devices, they want to plug in, so you got to accommodate that. It's been challenging, but it's fun. So I mean, there are times when you said this doesn't seem to be, I would say, make sense. Practical, but when you go in and you look at it and you see some of the people that they come in and drop and sit down in the seating area and stuff like that, and then that seating area becomes a more relaxed, informal sales area. So instead of the high pressure sales, you're sitting at a couch, and you're sitting there talking with the salesman, rather than going to an office and getting the high pressure sales. So I think the environment has become a lot more informal.
Well, it sounds extremely psychological to me, as
It
you're,
is.
It
is. Yeah.
Like, I'm curious how much time and effort they put into thinking that through. You're there with your kids, so they need a place to drop the kids off so we can focus on sales. We want to make this not feel like a traditional dealership, so we're taking out the desks and we're putting in couches and a bar.
I'm sure that they've done tons of focus groups and stuff, right? To get feedback. I mean, that's beyond kind of what I think the dealership does. The dealership isn't going to really do that, but I'm pretty sure these manufacturers actually do focus groups, and they are very much concerned about the customer experience.
Oh, for sure.
And some of these, what's also interesting is some of these manufacturers are not American, right? Per se. So like Kia is Korean, right?
Yeah.
There's a cultural difference there. So it's always been interesting to me to figure out how you adapt, how that is influenced by the American sales culture versus European sales culture. And I don't know if it changes around the country, around the world, as far as I know I've done some stuff in Germany, and I know that some of those dealerships there are kind of different than the way we do things here. But again, I'm sure they do a lot of focus groups, and they do a lot of investigation into that.
So how you said you've been to Germany and you've been to some dealerships over there?
Well, I've seen that. I've been to Germany, but I haven't been there But when I do Porsche, right?
Yeah.
And get involved with them, you're pretty much involved with the German Porsche, even though you got your Porsche USA. You're talking also with people in Germany. So especially when they're doing a new prototype, which I've been involved in a couple of those, where you actually get input from them as to how these things are going. So I did Aston Martin, which I probably worked with the London group more than I had with any other dealership manufacturer, because they had very specific criteria with regards to what they wanted, and to basically work with them around our ADA accessibility, which they didn't have to deal with there at that time. Also, they had very specific requirements around their finishes. So they had a 30, not to get into the weeds here, but they had a 30 centimeter by 30 centimeter terrazzo tile.
Okay.
And we don't really use metric. So everything had to be worked off this. So to then overlay a metric grid and work in that and stuff like that. So it's fun. It's challenging.
So you had to kind of translate that from metric to, the American imperial system.
Yeah, and in the past I've worked I cut my teeth in department store work. So I started out right out of school pretty much doing retail and department store work. And one of the things we did was a lot of we had an office in Mexico City, and I did a lot of work down in Mexico doing department stores and stuff like that. And so you get to know how to work with metrics. So I was familiar with it, so it wasn't a big thing. It's just you have to now communicate that to your contractors because your contractors aren't used to that as well. So, it's just knowing how to design your dimensions and design your drawings so that it works on an American level. Also, it meets the design criteria of the metric specifications.
Have you been down to South Florida and been to any of these manufacturers condo buildings? Like they have the Aston Martin residence, they have the Porsche towers down here. Have you seen the Aston Martin residence?
No.
Oh my God, it's beautiful.
That'd be fun. And actually, I haven't been down your way in a while because most of the dealerships that we have down there, that's our second big market was Southern Florida.
Yeah, it's a huge market
West
down
Palm
here.
Beach and stuff like that. So
yeah,
we were doing a lot of construction down there, so I was down there all the time. But since we basically finished most of those, I haven't been down there in a while. So
yeah, it's interesting. The guy who, I don't know if he's like the architecture, somebody who is heavily involved with building the Aston Martin residence tower. Have you heard of the tower?
I have not.
You have not? Look it up after this. It's freaking insane. I've been to it. It's beautiful. Very, very high end. But the guy who, helped build it or design it in some capacity is getting sued now for fraud. They're trying to sue him for like $5 million, And I was like, go figure, it's Miami.
Well, my insurance company doesn't like me doing residential stuff. They're like that multi-use, multi-family, multi-occupancy. That's the biggest lawsuit you get as an architect is with all that, with multi-family, multi-use, or multi-family, multi-occupant residential. Yeah.
I wonder how much influence these manufacturers like Porsche had, for example. Like they have a lot of influence over how you guys design your dealerships, and I'm curious how much influence they had on these buildings that were put together. And probably huge. I
would assume so. Yeah, because they're very meticulous with what they like and what they want.
Yeah, I think it's called the Porsche Design Tower. And inside of this tower, it's like, I don't know, 100 stories, however tall it is. They have a car elevator in the middle of the building, and you park your Porsche in your suite at the level of your unit.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
I've done a couple car elevators.
Yeah. Yeah. I bet those are tricky. Not fun.
Yeah. So, one of the things that we wanted to do way back is one of the dreams was to do a car elevator, display elevator, and we never got it. We never got a chance to do one, and then all of a sudden Carvana comes out, and now you have the car elevators, those car displays all the time. So yeah.
What do you think about Carvana?
We would have been one of the first, but we didn't get around to being able to do it. So.
Yeah. Speaking of Carvana, what do you think about their car elevators? Do you think Carvana is a giant success or a big flop? What's your opinion?
I hear they're having issues. Yeah. Right. So I don't get into the business aspects of the automotive, but what I've heard is on a business side that they're having issues more with the administratively is how you, because they do things very fast, and a lot of times you can't get titles and stuff like that fast. So there's such a quick turnaround on some of their stuff that they're having issues trying to get the legalities of the sale done fast, and that meets all the state laws, because every state governs automotive in their own way. So you go between states. It may be the laws for how you sell a car may be totally different than in Illinois than it is in Florida. I was talking with our guy up in Wisconsin, and he was saying that they have a Wisconsin law that says you have to complete the deal in 7 days. Well, sometimes you can't get the title, right? So you cannot give the car up until you get that title and stuff. And a lot of times he told me stories about someone who's driving a car and get pulled over, by the police. And they're like, well, you're driving a stolen car. I go, no, I just bought it. They go, well, where's your title? Yeah, so, I think that's their issue. And I think Auto Canada, backed out of the States also, because I think they were having a hard time dealing with the criteria for every individual state.
Yeah,
they tried to break into the American market, and I heard that they were having difficulties, and they backed out. So
Not surprised. Yeah, the states can make it a little bit difficult. Well, especially with automotive. There's so much red tape around automotive for,
well,
you know.
some states you can operate on a Sunday. In Illinois, you can't operate on a Sunday,
Yeah, yeah.
right? So
I'm
I
from
never
Las.
really understood what the reason for that was, but you know, so every state can do its own thing.
It's well, I'm from Las Vegas, and one of a family friend of mine that I've known for quite a while is their family. They were one of the first, I think, Chevy dealerships in Las Vegas, and the grandfather started it. You know, and in Las Vegas, it's illegal to sell cars on Sunday.
Yeah.
And supposedly the story goes is he got tired of it, and he had a buddy in, you know, Congress or the Senate or somebody high up in government in the state, and he's like, hey, I want a law no one can sell cars on Sundays. And so he helped get it passed so he could have a day off.
That sounds very familiar. I think that's pretty much the way it happened in Illinois too.
Yeah, I think something like that, you know, somebody with a friend in
It's all politics. I mean,
high places.
most of it's all politics.
Yeah.
It's also it's amazing. It's like when you start a new like we did a brand new dealership in downtown Chicago. It's an urban setting. It was a Porsche, and you know you have to before you can open. You know my GM was making sales while administratively he was selling cars while we were under construction, but he couldn't finalize the sales because we weren't an official dealership yet and had not had the state come up and look at and certify that we are a dealership. So, you know, he was backing up all these sales, and you know, the state has to come and they've got criteria. You've got to have a sign up and everything like this, and even if you don't have your final signage up, you got to have a banner sign. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that the state dictates in order for them to release your state license to sell cars, and that's also interesting to deal with. Where you these guys come up there and you walk them to the store and you answer their questions and stuff like that. So, but the good news is once we got our license, all of a sudden he was able to release all those cars, and he had a hell of a first month.
Well, I'm sure the boss loved that.
Yeah,
you know, all these big expensive buildings to pay for. So, have you had any incidences with, you know, any crazy stories where like you built a building and it just had to be torn down? It was wrong. Anything crazy happened?
Well, one of the things that Mr. Napleton always says that if he buys a building, he doesn't want to demo it. So that's kind of drives kind of some of the things where, hey, I bought it, it's there, we got to use it. So most of the stuff comes down to adapting the building or going, you know, and saying this is not conducive to a dealership. An example would be in a Porsche I did here locally. There was two separate buildings side by side on properties, 18 inches difference between the two. So we were building a two-story addition in between the two buildings with a second story, a display, right, a car display. So the one building was our existing Porsche, and it was old and had been a lot of use. So everyone kept saying, demo the building, start from scratch. You got your nice building to the one side. Let's just extend that all the way through. Why do you have to deal with this existing building? And he said, no, I don't want to. I want to keep it, deal with it. So we dealt with it. At the end of the project, after going through everything, he said, I wish I had demoed that building because it was so complex to keep it, and how much money he spent. It would have been cheaper to demo it and start from scratch than all the hoops we jumped through to keep it. Because we also had, in the middle of this thing, we had an operating service department. So we were converting the one side of our existing building into service. And then we had the other building on the other side that we were remodeling, plus the two-story addition in the middle, and then we had an operating service department right smack dab in the middle of it, which we had to get cars in and out and like that. So sometimes the issue is not so much, it's like dealing with the existing conditions causes more problems than just starting from scratch. But that also creates challenges, and solving those are the fun part of it.
So do you get much into the, hey, I have this great idea. This is how, the owner wants it to look. This is my take on it. Have you ever had to go back to the drawing board and they're like, look, this is going to cost way too much money to build it how you want it?
Typically, with the way that the manufacturers are dictating the design, they're aware that like take a Kia. Their prototype is a 21-foot tall frameless glass storefront. If you're adapting an existing store, they know you're not going to get a 21-foot storefront, so they're not going to tell you that you have to demo that. So some of those things are up to us to say, hey, here's what we got. I would do a drawing showing them how it would work, right? And then you submit that to them, and then they review it, and then they make their comments. And they're pretty accommodating because they understand. They understand it's they're not going to force you to spend $2 or $3 million more than you need to on a building that doesn't accommodate because a lot of these buildings are 20, 30 years old. One of the other issues we had with a lot of our buildings is back in the day, auto dealerships, they were 2 or 3 feet off the ground, off the grade, because they wanted the cars and the storefronts up to, you can see them as you're driving down the street. Well, that was way before we had accessibility requirements and all that stuff. It's now a lot of times to try to deal with some of these existing stores that have that 30-inch or 24, 30-inch high raised showroom, having to deal with that with lifts and ramps and all that. So sometimes you have to convince the manufacturer. Like, why did you do this? Well, we did this because we have this issue with the code and ADA and stuff like that. So the pushback I have is code. So code is usually my friend in those instances, where if they want something that the code says no, I can push back and say it's a code issue, especially with accessibility. But generally, it's not that much of a big deal.
So which manufacturer would you say has like the tightest, restrictions and, certain levels or standards they want you to be at?
Right now, I would say it's Hyundai Genesis. And my understanding in talking with some of the people at Hyundai is that it's because of the Korean owner. The design came out of Korea, and they were giving money to implement this. This is how I understand it. So they were giving money to support because they're pushing. So they were providing money, but then you had to keep a certain guideline, and they were very, very strict on the guideline, right? So, if your paint is the right color, if you have a bollard that's painted the wrong color, you got to repaint it. And a lot of it was very nitpicky, and a lot of it doesn't make a lot of sense, but it's a thing where if you don't do it, you don't get your approval, and you can't sell cars. So. They hold it. They have a very, very strict. And I think one of the ones we had like a 20-page punch list from Hyundai. Little things that are wrong, that you got to do this or that, or the other thing. And it's like some of them doesn't make sense, but it's their criteria. It's what they want.
Why do you think that the Hyundai Genesis brand is so nitpicky?
I don't know. You could say brand ego. I really don't know, because there are others you would think that would be like Porsche. You would think would be very strict, and I found them very accommodating. If you're keeping to the flavor of everything, and you're using the finishes and it looks right, they've been very accommodating. And you would think that they wouldn't be, but I don't know. It's I think because Korea was so involved in the implementation that the American that Hyundai America didn't want to get into any trouble with this. So I think it was just deferring to Hyundai Korea's design because they were so involved in it and the implementation of it. I think that's probably why, because then they had to answer to Korea rather than just answer to themselves locally, in the United States.
Well, I mean, they're based out of South Korea, I would
Yes.
imagine,
Yeah.
right? So are they communist over there? Or are they,
No,
what sort of,
no.
no?
That's North. That's only North
Just
Korea.
North?
Yeah, South
Okay.
Korea. South Korea is democratic.
Democratic, okay. But you said that the government would put pressure on them
Well,
if
no,
they're
not the
not.
government. The dealers, the
Oh, the
manufacturer.
manufacturer.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah,
okay.
because they're based out of South Korea, and
Yeah.
they were involved in the implementation in the United States that the Hyundai America did not. They were deferring to the criteria of Hyundai Korea, and they didn't. I don't know if they had in the past, because this is a brand new rollout, and they had a lot of proprietary stuff. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but they have what they call the Shape Sky, that bronze facade, which is that crackle look.
Mm-hmm.
That is a proprietary ACM material they had designed specifically for them. So you have to use, and I would say that one of the other things that's the most frustrating thing is having to use proprietary vendors. Because I have union trades that do better work than I've seen their proprietary vendors work cheaper. I can get it done better and cheaper than using their proprietary vendors because obviously if you have to use them, the prices go up, right? So that's the frustrating thing because your owner comes to you and goes, "Why is this so expensive?" I said, "Well, I got to use these guys."
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I'm sure it's like, one of the manufacturer's owner's uncle's brother's sister's cousin or something.
Well, I mean, like anything, it's you have, like say a standard job where you specify a light. So the electrician goes to the distributor. The distributor goes to the manufacturer. The distributor buys the lights. He marks it up. The electrician buys it from the distributor. He marks it up. The GC gets it and he marks it up, right? So it's that same thing, is that the more hands you have into the process, the more expensive it gets because now you've got people who are administrating it. You got people, you got more hands, more people, more eyes on it, and things just get snowball and get more and more expensive.
Yeah. Kind of like how the government ends up spending, what, $50 hammers?
Yeah.
That's,
Well, yeah, because they can, and no one says no.
yeah. It kind of what it reminded me of. It's interesting. Yeah,
And
that's crazy.
the dealers could probably push back, but the issue is, you pick your battles, right?
Yeah.
Right? Why do you want to nitpick something that's why do you want to save say $100,000 on something when on a $9 million project when you're gonna that's that you just want to get it done, you move on, you're gonna you need more money. So you pick your battles.
Yeah. I imagine building a new building and remodeling one, there's plenty of battles.
Yes. Yeah,
You can only imagine.
there's always something that comes up. Yes.
Yeah. So, what's been, what would you say has been one of your guys' most exciting projects that you've done, or most unique projects that you've done?
Well, that Porsche I said locally, which is was a 60,000 square foot facility, where it's taking two buildings, combining them, and then wrapping both of them in a brand new facade. That was Mr. Naples said he didn't even want to drive by it because it was so complex, because it would drive him nuts. He'd be worried about it. But that was fun because it was just basically solving all the problems. The other one was the Aston Martin that we did we did like a 3,000 square foot boutique showroom downtown Chicago. And the interesting part about that was on the ground floor of a high-rise residential building, right? So it used to be a real estate office, and so you've got a 40-story tower, which when we get down to the bottom, those columns are 3 feet in diameter because they're supporting the tower above you. So how do you do a showroom when you've got these big and it was a waterfall building so that it narrowed as you get to the street. So of course our showroom is right on the street. So I've got columns and we're not a grid. So trying to plan and make sure, and the interesting working with the manufacturer out of London, they wanted the columns square. And I told them to keep them round.
Yeah.
And it was a big battle because they said, no, we want them square. I said, keep them round. I'll plaster coat them. It'll have the same finish on them. But what the problem is, if I do them square like you want, they're going to become a visual barrier to your car. So they eventually allowed me to, and literally when you're in there, your eyes look around the column because they're round. So you'll see the car sticking out around, and then your eyes drawn around it. So we had the grand opening, and there was a tap on my shoulder, and it was the president of Aston Martin, and he shook my hand and said, "I wanted to thank you for forcing us to keep them round because it turned. I mean, it would have been a mistake to do them square." So that was an interesting design problem for that. Just trying to convince them to deviate from their standards for the conditions of the space.
You wouldn't. That's interesting. I mean, I wouldn't have thought that the president of Aston Martin would be particularly interested in your little building in Chicago, but I suppose there's not that many Aston Martin stores out there.
It's a very prestige thing, and also I don't think they've ever. I can't say this for certain, but I don't think they had a downtown boutique store like that. There were other stores. There are other dealerships downtown that are imports, but they're bigger stores and they do multiple, imports, foreign imports. This was a very specific thing, and it was I think they just didn't have one like it before. So, and we were doing another one as well at the same time in the suburbs. So I think it was a big thing in the Chicago market. So I think that's what it was. Breaking into the Chicago market, I think was a big thing for them, especially downtown.
Yeah. No, that's actually really cool. And Aston Martin being such a boutique brand it is. How many cars could you fit in this little building? I'm just imagining a small building. So
I had 4.
4? Okay.
Yeah. I had 4 cars in there.
Yeah. That's kind of what I figured. That's what I was imagining when you were describing it. I suppose you don't have to sell.
We had no inventory either. So our inventory was out in the suburbs because we were downtown in an urban area, and we had no parking or anything like that. So we had some spots in the parking garage, and we kind of enclosed them in the garage, with a garage with a door on it. But we could only get 3 or 4 cars in there, so we didn't have a lot of. We kind of used that for delivery. So if someone bought a car, we would have it shipped down and then turn it over to them. But we didn't have anything for inventory.
On the used car side of the house, anything notable, or any tips you could give used car dealers out there when it comes to improving their buildings? You got any advice?
Well, I mean, with used cars, it's pretty much inventory, right? So having. And I've noticed that the original focus was, you have your new cars out on the front line, but now there's a mix of it because the used car sales is fairly heavy, so I think there's been a switch to used car, pre-owned, versus new. I think, but the only thing is just inventory. And just making sure that you have the inventory to keep it on your site. I mean, I know most of the manufacturers, when I do a site plan, there's a criteria. So, you get a sheet that says for the sales of the specific dealership. There is a chart, right? So it's all based on sales, unit sales. So they'll say you fall, and based on history. If it's a new one, they'll have to come up with the metric, but based on your history on a dealership, you have a certain amount of sales. So you fall into one of the lines in that chart, which will give you need a certain size showroom, a certain number of cars in the showroom, a certain size parts department, a certain when you get to the exterior, then you say a certain amount of customer parking, certain amount of new car parking, certain amount of service parking. So that stuff is pretty much given to you. And then you just kind of lay it, you just kind of give them a site plan that shows you what you have. If you're limited on your site, you've got to show them what you can get. And then they, usually they'll deal with it, but they may adjust your metric a little bit depending on what you meet and don't meet. So that's, I just give them I just fit what I can. And then that's above my pay grade to negotiate with the manufacturer.
It's been awesome having you on the show. I appreciate it, guys. If you do have any architecture needs, or if you're building a dealership and your guys are stuck, shoot him an email. He's been doing it for a long time. So, anyways, guys, if you enjoyed this episode, share it with somebody that you like. If you didn't enjoy this episode and we bored you to tears, share it with someone that you don't like. Let us bore them. So, anyways, guys, we'll catch you on the next one, and thanks for tuning in.